Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a spark plug change on the Chrysler V6 Pentastar engine. It's used in many vehicles, but today's vehicle will be a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland. And in the first part of the video, I'm going to give you a walkthrough of what it's going to take to disassemble the top part of your engine and some of the challenges. In the second part of the video, I'll show you the actual work being done, and I'll put timestamps in the video description so you can move around quickly. But before we get started, here's a photo of all the tools that I use to accomplish this, and I'll put links in the video description below for you. Step one, you'll want to loosen this ring right here with 8 millimeters. Just loosen it. 2 metal tabs that will pop off. You can take your air box out and the air filter out, and this stays right here. Next, pop this guy off, set aside. Then you'll have another metal hose clamp. Loosen that with 8 millimeters. You're gonna remove this sensor, and it just flicks backwards, slides off. Then you want to slide that backwards, take a flathead screwdriver and gently pry up, and that will slide off. And you can remove this as well. Next, you'll want to take a trim remove pry bar and pry this up and off. This is a really brittle part of the engine, and mine cracked, and you can expect possibly yours too as well. I'll put a link in the description below for a new tube, which ends here, and it's $37 on eBay, so no big deal if it breaks. Okay, now that this is loose, all the sensors are detached, and this is loose, there's one big rubber one of these below, and the whole thing will pop off, and you can set this air intake aside. With the air intake aside, next I would take off the throttle body with 4 bolts using 8 millimeters and a socket. So just loosen this, 8 millimeters. There's a rubber O-ring on the back. Take the whole thing out, set it aside. Don't lose the O-ring. Okay, with the throttle body out of the way, there's a black rubber tube that will pull off. It's pretty easy if you have difficulty. Flathead screwdriver, pry it backwards while pulling, and it slides off. The next will be 2 challenging bolts. The first one is going to be a 10 millimeter nut. That one's easily achievable with just a socket, and you can get the 10 millimeter off no problem. The more difficult one, you'll need a longer extension like this, 10 millimeter socket. Feel with your fingers, find how to attach it, and then at just the right angle, you'll loosen that. Once it's loosened, you can get it off with your hand, no problem. And so they'll be left with 2 metal studs and 2 screws to set aside. Next, you'll need to remove 2 more screws, one here and one here on the side of the engine. Loosen those to a metal bracket, take them off, set them aside. Now, the most challenging part of the entire thing is loosening 2 13 millimeter nuts at the bottom of the metal bracket on the side of the engine. The one in the front you can reach, 13 millimeter hand wrench. You're gonna get it in there just at the right part and loosen it. Don't need to take it off completely. The next one is the hardest part of the entire job. There's an AC silver line with a metal bracket up against the stud with a nut on it. I had to get a giant crowbar, and I gently bent that metal out of the way without damaging the AC line. I didn't have enough room to get a closed wrench in there. I could only use the open end of the wrench, and this part alone took about an hour and a half to get that pried out of the way and loosened. I'll try to show some photos and better advice on exactly how to get that out. Next, you're gonna have trim tool remove to pop this off, which is just a support bracket for this tube. Put it back on right now. Okay, with all that stuff out of the way, your next task is to loosen 7 bolts. And you can do that with either an 8mm socket or a T20 Torx. I found the socket to work best. 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one's super hard. You need to have just the right extension size. And in fact, the one I have here in my hand worked, but it would have been better if it was a little bit shorter. I think this one's 4.5. I needed a little bit less. But what I had to do was get it on the screw, then attach and loosen it up. And that took at least a half an hour right there to find something that would work properly. Once all these are loosened, you want to try to get them up and out of the way, because this has to slide right first and then up. And if any one of these bolts is down, you won't be able to slide, especially this guy. So what I did here was I got a really strong magnet and I pulled the screw up and I held it up in order to move it all over out of the way. And the first time I didn't have a magnet, so what I did is I lifted the screw up and I stuffed in a paper towel to keep the screw from falling down. And that was enough. If you don't keep this screw up, you're gonna waste 30 minutes trying to get this out and it just won't come out. And while you are getting it out, it's got sharp metal and it's gonna be scoring the intake gaskets and other parts of the engine. So 7 bolts here, 2 of the 10mm you already took out, a throttle body, 2 10mm nuts, 13mm nuts, and that allows you simply to move these metal brackets out just enough to lift this, because there's metal studs mounted on the side of this, and if you can't slide those brackets gently over, you'll never get this out of the way. Okay, now that this is out of the way, you can remove this rubber foam here, and you can see the entire top of the engine for a normal spark plug change. Okay, let's talk about parts real quick before we move on. You can buy Mopar genuine Jeep spark plugs, and they will be about twice the price of these online. And in reality, they are using the Champion Iridium 9407 spark plug. But the question is, how do I know that? If you go to the Champion website and you enter the information for your model engine, it will spit out a equivalent spark plug, which behind the scenes is actually a Champion spark plug with just a Mopar label on top of it. So check there to make sure that you're using the correct spark plugs, or go to your dealership or parts department online and buy the Mopar spark plug for your engine. When you get your spark plugs, you want to check the gap on them, because they can be dropped at any time and that will affect the spark plug gap. So make sure you check the gap before installation. You'll also want to have some anti-seize lube available for when you screw in your new spark plugs, and probably some dielectric grease to put onto the ignition coil. Also, you'll need a set of intake gaskets, which are relatively cheap, but since you're doing all this work, you should replace those rubber gaskets. Remember, you're doing this around 100,000 miles on this vehicle, so there's a few things that are worth replacing at this point. Also, it seems to be common on a certain percentage of Pentastar engines to have the oil cooler and oil filter housing leak. So if you have your engine this far open, you may want to replace that $100 to $150 part. And also this evaporator tube on the top of the engine, it gets really brittle over age, or at least it did on mine. So you may crack that in the process. If you do, not a big deal. You can get a genuine replacement here for about $40. And in the meanwhile, I used some emergency silicone plumber's tape and I just wrapped it real tight, and it ran fine for several weeks until I got a new part. Okay, that's the first half of this video. If you found this useful, give us a like and a subscribe. And if you want to stick around, you can watch the second part of the video, and it's going to be a little more detailed, watching me struggle through this process. Okay, that's the end of this video. If you need any help with the actual spark plugs, just Google another video about how to change spark plugs, and I'm sure they'll have great tips and tricks on that part. So if you found this useful, please give us a like and a subscribe. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to help you guys out. All right, see you guys in the next video.